piggy.
She's going.
She ate that.
She ate it.
Thing.
It's going.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she's.
Your mommy said to me on Sunday that she said, Shelly, every time she sees you, she expects a treat.
Yeah, that's our daughter. Okay, we're in Luke. We're sort of looking at a snowball starting to roll downhill.
Well, good morning. Hello.
Oh, good morning. Good. Anyway, we're looking at this. We're at a place where Luke is really going to pick up speed. Just as sort of a preface, we're going to get through this one. And the reason I say it is, as I was working on it, I think I've probably taught every book in the New Testament at one time or another. And so when I do it, I look at old notes, the stuff. And if anybody's ever seen my notes, they're very detailed. There's a lot of questions, all kinds of stuff. Well, every now and then, and I think I feel comfortable with the job I've done in the past. When I've done it in the past, I think I've been diligent in researching the text. But every now and then, every time I do it, I don't just call out the old notes. I go through it again to make sure it's consistent. And every now and then, and it's happened a couple of times in the last, I'm thinking 3 sessions, that something has really come out as I've read it that doesn't seem to be consistent with what the interpretation I made before. And because of words, because of the text, not because of any different feeling, but just because the text doesn't say what I seem to think it said. And so when I hit that in this, and we'll talk about it, so I get really excited when I see something that's different. And you do a little bit of research and you see what other people have written, because they're people way smarter than me who have done work on the text, and see what their conclusions are. And then you kind of go from there. So what we're going to, I say this because generally when I do write this study, I go over it twice to make sure it kind of flows. I know the direction. Didn't do that this time because I spent the time I normally spend working on, and you're going to see it's a little thing, but I think it makes a big difference. That's here in Luke that you don't see in the other 3 Gospels, which means it must be important to him. So anyway, we'll get there. We're at a place in the Gospel of Luke that Jesus has been in Jerusalem, right? How did Jesus enter Jerusalem?
On a donkey.
Okay, he entered on a donkey, and what was significant about his coming in the donkey?
That donkey, he told somebody where to go get it and bring it to him.
It shows a lot about his authority and such. And we get a taste that maybe something greater than just what's happening on earth is occurring. Things are involved here that are beyond what we might be able to see. Okay, so we've done that. He's come in, cleansed the temple. Why did he cleanse the temple? According to Luke, what would be the reason it would appear as though he gets out, because it's a little different than we saw in the other ones, because he doesn't chase out the sacrificial stuff. He gets rid of the merchandise. Maybe it's because he's going to use the temple as a place to teach, because that's what he starts doing. So the temple is there. He's not really talking about Jewish worship going like he does in the other. But here he's going to teach, and he's been teaching in the temple. He's taught, the opposition one by one. He's kind of dealt with them. He's given his disciples a glimpse of what's going to happen in the future, which resonates more with Luke's church than it does to the disciples in the story, because they're there.
Flutter. I have an A flutter. There you go.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I told you it would come out in the middle. Yeah.
Flutter.
I told him I'd probably pop it out in the middle when I remembered it. Okay, now we can go ahead.
I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm totally confused. I'm fluttering. Okay, good. Yeah. Shelley is fluttering. Okay, so he's been teaching, and after he taught, and focuses on, all I can think of is flutter. Butterflies. I'm thinking butterflies.
I'm sorry.
The end, which has more resonance for Luke's church than it does for the disciples, because he's here. When they're on this side of the cross, so they're not aware of what Luke's Christians are aware. And then after he teaches at the temple, and we looked at it last week, what happens with Jesus and his closest group, his apostles?
They're going to have a dinner.
Okay, they're going to have a dinner.
Last Supper.
We got two things, going on. One, we got the stuff around the dinner, and we've also got what else happened in what we talked about last week. We got this stuff about the dinner. What else becomes? Okay, with the betrayal, and in Luke, the betrayal is kind of interesting. We're going to see the same thing in what we're looking at today, which is also interesting. As Luke presents the betrayal, which we see in all four Gospels, Luke adds something to this betrayal that the other three don't. What does he say about Judas's betrayal? The devil enters it. And the other ones we've got, either unknown, don't know why he does it, or inference that he's doing it for money. But Luke, the devil enters it, which becomes kind of interesting. Because by having the devil be involved, what does that do to not only the dinner, but the story that follows? What does that do to this story if the devil is now actively involved?
You're just going through to a spiritual realm
versus
versus the worldly realm.
Yeah, we're talking about something that is not just a greedy man, looking for a quick buck. We're looking at something that is cosmic. So Luke has, by just adding that one sentence that the devil enters him, he's elevated this whole story to a oh jeez. What was in it?
That was mine. Oh my gosh.
The rest of the bag.
What was it? Treats.
No wonder she hasn't been baking.
She's been eating.
Oh, I got a
Oh
problem
my
today.
goodness.
I'll get it.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
she. Well, my gosh, no wonder you've been quiet. Now you don't have any left. Who's a
Okay.
Miss Piggy today?
Yes. Okay, so we've got
Ellen, I could have gotten that. Oh my goodness. The woman's crawling under the table.
Ouch, ouch, she bumped her
Part of the bag.
head.
I'll get
My
this.
purse is up here. How did she get it? It was in my purse.
don't have a clue.
I don't know.
I don't understand. I honestly, she hasn't pulled my purse off.
No, she hasn't. Okay, anyway, we've got, he elevates. So this is a cosmic story. This isn't just a story. This is cosmic. So Luke kind of raises it to another level. And so we've got Judas betraying him as a result of the devil entering. We also have him sharing the meal. And the meal is a little different than what we see in Matthew and Mark. John is very different because John is the meal is a long time because it's 3 chapters of Jesus talking during the meal. But in Matthew and Mark, it's relatively brief. What happens at the meal? When Jesus is at the meal, what occurs?
Oh, he said, you mean when he sent Peter and John to go to get...
Well, even after that. Now, they're having the meal.
Okay.
All of that's occurred. They're having the meal. What happens at that meal? At least in what we looked at last week. We'll look at more, because what we're looking at today is all part of the meal.
He says that someone will betray him.
Okay, he talks about somebody betraying him, which we already know because Luke's told us is going to be Judas, right? Okay, so we know that. What else do we have going on at the meal?
The wine and the bread.
Okay, we got the wine and the bread. This is my body given for you. This is my blood shed for you. That kind of thing that we see in all of the Gospels, and we see Paul talk about it in 1 Corinthians. So we've got that, which is a ritual. And why might that, and it's done in a way that sounds kind of ritualistic. You know, he took the bread, he broke it, he gave it. You know, it sounds like a ritual's being performed. Why would that be important?
Because he's telling them this is the last time he will eat or drink with them.
Okay, he's certainly communicating a clear message
Yes.
to his apostles. What else is Luke communicating to his church?
To me, because it was a ritual that they were commonplace, that they knew of. But when Jesus did it, and I don't know how the other rituals went, but just that it was an offering of the wine and the bread. He says, this is my blood. This is my blood that I shed for you. So now he's taking ownership of that ritual.
Okay, and who's practicing that ritual? Who's practicing the ritual? We are.
Yeah.
Luke's church is practicing it. We are practicing it. Paul's church in Corinth was practicing it. You know, we practice this ritual, and what Luke has done is same thing Matthew, Mark, and John do, is they put this ritual to Jesus. Why do we do it? Because Paul told us to do it? Heck no. We do it because Jesus told us to do it. And Jesus did it the same way we do it. You know, he uses the same words. So it kind of is linking this thing that the church is doing into Jesus Christ himself. This is from Jesus. We are doing it because of Jesus. Okay, so he does that, and but then Luke adds something that's, and we'd expect that in all of the Gospels. But Luke adds something to the meal that's different. All the Gospels talk about betrayal. All the Gospels talk about this ritual. What else does Luke add to the meal that we definitely don't see?
Covenant.
Well, we do have to, he does mention it in the other Gospels. Remember one of the things that was sort of interesting. Before he shares the bread and the cup, what does Jesus do?
He said someone is going to betray him at that table.
Right, he certainly does that. What else does he do?
He gave thanks.
True, but he gives thanks in Matthew, Mark, and John. We got another cup.
Oh, yeah.
We got another cup. Before he shares the bread and the cup, there's a cup that comes before that he shares, that you see only in Luke. And that cup is focused on what? Because that's a little different than this is my body given, this is my blood shed. The first cup represents something a little bit different. What's that first, and it's really the first cup. What's that first cup representing?
Because he says, take this cup and divide it amongst yourselves. For
Yeah.
I'm saying to you, I will not drink of the fruit. That's when he's, I don't know.
Until the kingdom comes.
Okay, pointing to the coming of the kingdom. So all of a sudden into this meal, we've got this kingdom is coming in the future. Now, and we've talked about it before, remember Luke's church is little tiny church, year 90, 95 AD, small. They expected Jesus to come. I mean, early Christians, we know that because that's what Paul says. They expected Jesus to come back almost immediately. Any time now. And Paul has to tell the Thessalonians, and we're talking about telling the Thessalonians in the year, maybe 50. Don't lose heart. Don't lose heart. Jesus is coming back. The dead in Christ are going to rise first, and then we're going to. So don't worry. Jesus is coming back. Well, Luke is writing now this. His church is 40 years later. And for 40 years they've been thinking, well, you can't think Jesus is coming back tomorrow for 40 stupid years. Every day. Well, this could be the day. Eventually you say, it ain't going to happen. I've waited long enough, especially when one generation dies, 2 generations die, now we're working on 3 generations. When is this going to happen? And if your whole faith is predicated on Jesus is going to come back any day now, and he hadn't come, your faith is going to become a little weak. little weak, a little shaky. It's a little shaky. If that's what I trust, is that God's going to come down and save me from this. And it's been 40 years, for crying out loud, longer than that, since Jesus died. You're asking a lot of me to keep going and passing it on to my children and my grandchildren any day. And that's what Luke is writing to. So again, this reminder that, the kingdom is coming. The kingdom is coming, and Jesus is going to share, in this meal. That, I think, becomes a really important lesson for Luke's church to hear again at this really important time. Now, we've got this meal, that's all has been served. Now, what mood do you get at this meal? What do you think is the mood, the general atmosphere of this dinner? What sense do you have? By the way, Luke has written it, because he's describing it. I mean, he's choosing to describe it. What feelings do you have? What mood do you think is present in that upper room?
Sadness.
What's that?
Sadness.
Well, maybe some sadness.
I think they're all wondering. So first he says, somebody's going to betray me, so they're all talking. Who's going to betray you? And
Okay,
is
now-
it I? And then they start fighting over who's going to be the greatest.
Now we're at 21. Before we get to 21, the first 20 verses, we've got something sort of established, a mood established, which I think shifts a little bit in verse 21, because the topic of conversation changes just a little bit. Because who speaks in verse 21 of chapter 22? Who is speaking?
Jesus.
Jesus is. And what does Jesus say?
That the hand of him who is going to betray him is there at that
Okay,
time.
somebody at the table is going to betray him. Now, about whom is he talking?
Judas.
Okay, talking about Judas. Why do you think Luke felt the need to mention that here? Why do you think this is something that Luke wants to make sure? Now, he shared the meal, the body given, the blood shed. Why do you think that Luke felt, okay, I need to, mention, the betrayal?
That's all this, Jesus is in control. He knows what has to be done, and he's just showing, I know that somebody on this table is going to do it, so he knows beforehand and before it even happens.
Okay, he knows that. What else does he know as you continue on? What else does he say? Not only does he say somebody is going to betray me, but he says what?
It was determined.
This has been determined. This has to happen. Now, What does that suggest about the betrayal? What is Jesus when he says that? This is determined. Somebody around the table is going to betray me, but this has been determined. What is that suggesting about the betrayal and what's going to happen after?
It was meant to be.
What's that?
It was meant to be.
Okay, it's in God's will. God's in control of this, right? God is in control of this story. Becomes kind of interesting because we, the reader of Luke, know, why is Judas betraying Jesus?
Because the devil went in.
Because the devil went into him. And yet, God is in control of the story. Which becomes really interesting when you think about the fact that the devil entered Judas, and that's what motivated him. That would seem to suggest that God is in control. Even though, remember, the devil, Satan, at the temptation of Jesus, at the end of the temptation in Luke, the devil leaves and said he leaves for a more opportune time. And then, boom, he returns. This idea that the devil's entering Judas, we may say, ooh, the devil's involved now. Ooh, it's going to be a contest between the devil and God. And God, now the devil's playing his hand. But what Jesus says is,
It was already determined he was going.
yeah, this is not a struggle between good and evil, the devil and me. God's in control. This has already all been determined. Everybody is playing a role in this.
Do you think the devil knew that Jesus planned it, or that God planned this all?
It's really interesting. There's a theologian, and the name's not all that important, but he sees, in his writings, he said wrote that the most important thing in the crucifixion is the victory of Jesus, and in that, not the suffering, but the victory.
Yes.
In fact, his idea is Christus Victor. That's his idea. Jesus won victory and really defeated the devil, although it was never a contest. So that the devil knew not, he would say, not relevant. This is where the devil thought he was winning. In fact, he said, the devil thought he really had the upper hand. In fact, when Jesus died on the cross, the devil assumed, I won. I've won the day. And the fact is, the empty tomb showed the devil didn't win. And I think that's almost being suggested here. That this isn't, even though the devil entered Judas, he's not. He's no more an independent. He's no more independent than anybody else at this table. It's all moving in a direction, and who controls that direction? God. God isn't reacting. God is in control. Okay, so anyway, so we've got that, and then what does he say after he says, "Man, this has all been determined"? What does he then say? What does Jesus then say? Which is an interesting thing to say. If he says the Son of Man is going as it has been determined, which means Judas has got to betray me, and I have got to go to the cross. And then he says what?
But woe to that man who betrays him.
Woe to the one who betrays me. And why does that become kind of an interesting statement, given what we know is going on here? When he says, woe to the one who betrays me, and we know who's going to betray him, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to be Judas. So woe to Judas, right?
Yes.
But why is Judas betraying him?
Because the devil went.
Because the devil went into him. Oh. It's kind of an interesting thing. That statement makes a lot of sense in the other three Gospels. Because Judas is greedy. He's doing it for the money. Here he's not doing it for the money. Remember, he betrays Jesus, and afterwards they say, "Ooh, the information was so good, we'll give you some money." So he betrays him before money is even offered, because the devil enters him.
Yeah.
And here, though, Jesus is saying, but he's going to be held
You ate it all.
accountable, which becomes really interesting. So how do we reconcile these two ideas?
Well, was he saying woe to the devil or woe to Judas?
Well, maybe.
Because when you could take it either way, because to the one.
Yeah, now that's
the devil was actually taking over Judas.
That's really interesting. That I think could be an interpretation. That when he says woe, he's not talking about Judas. He's talking about
The devil.
He's talking about Satan. That's good. That helps. Thank you. That helps me a lot, because for me that's a hard thing to reconcile. But that makes a lot of sense, that this is directed at the devil and not at Judas.
Woe to the man.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he died, even when the two sinners were on the cross beside him, I always had a hard time with this. And then, when he is suffering on the cross and he says, "You will be with me in glory," to the one thief, and he's dying for sinners. Mm-hmm. He's dying for Judas too.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right.
Nowhere does it say, or even insinuate that he doesn't. Because over and over again he's saying that. So he knew what Judas would do, and he doesn't Yeah. So I think it's all the scary part is if the devil can do that and enter somebody, we all need to be on guard and guard our hearts and do that, because he could enter anybody.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But not everybody, because isn't the devil his power is limited on this earth. He can't, where God is everywhere, Satan can only be one place.
One of the things I think, if we look, and I'm going to mention this quickly because we got some exciting things coming up. I think we tend, and this I think is in and of itself is the work of the devil, I think we end up giving the devil way too much power. Way too much power. Way too much power. If you look at Scripture, the only power the devil seems to have is to distract. The devil distracts. I mean, that's what he did with Jesus at the temptation. That's what he did in the story of Job. All the devil does is he distracts. And distracts us. The devil says, look at that. And we look.
Yeah.
And now we're distracted. And that's what he did to Jesus in the wilderness. Look at that. Look at this. Think about what you could do. That's all he does. That's all he does. That's the power of the devil. And I think what we end up doing is we end up assuming he has this great power because he wants us to. If we assume he has enormous power, now we really are what? Distracted. Because we are so scared of what the devil will do that we are now distracted. That's guiding our behavior. That ends up shaping what we do rather than doing what God has called us to do. Rather than moving forward with our eyes straight ahead, we end up moving forward doing this.
It comes down to choice.
And then looking around. Well, it comes down to, I think, the fact that the devil is really good at what he does. He really is good at distracting us. I mean, he is really good at convincing us that what he's right. And that's what he did with Jesus in the world. And anyway, that's how I see the devil. And it's interesting, you see that in some of the portrayals. Not all of them, because a lot of them have him as great power. But like in Dante's Inferno, which is fascinating, at the core of hell, you have the devil. At the core of hell is the devil. But the devil is sitting in a block of ice with wings that are perpetually flapping, but he can't fly. He can't move. But he's got these huge wings that are perpetually flapping in the core of hell, sitting in ice, constantly chewing two people that are suffering eternally. Judas and Brutus. The devil is constantly chewing them and tears are rolling down his face. That's how Dante presents the devil. And as a kind of a pathetic figure. Not as one that you see in horror movies, but really a pathetic figure. But I think he's a distractor.
I think that movie's a distraction.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so we've got, but this triggers a conversation, right? And what do they start talking about? The other disciples.
Oh, who's going to be number one?
Well, even before that, they talk about
who it is that's going to
who's going to betray him. Okay, which we see in the other Gospels. But now in Luke, we shift. Because this we don't see. What Jesus starts talking about, we don't see in the other Gospels, not here. We see them in other places, in Matthew and Mark, but not here at the meal. We see it earlier in the story, associated with children, with the bringing the children. This thing about greatness, right? Now, linked with what came before, because the disciples start talking about which one is the greatest. Which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. Now, it's kind of interesting, because given the context, what have they just been talking about?
The betrayal.
They've been talking about the betrayal. So they were talking about which one was
going to betray him.
Yeah, was the biggest stinker.
Yeah.
And now they're talking about which one
is going to be the top one.
Is the greatest.
Yeah.
Which one is going to be the greatest. Okay? So this is the context Luke provides. What does Jesus say about greatness? What's the first thing he says in verse? Because Luke presents this discussion that's going on in verse 25. What does Jesus say about greatness? As he's responding to their conversation.
That the king of the Gentiles?
Okay. Interesting. He doesn't mention greatness in his response, right? Mm-hmm. He talks about the kings of the Gentiles. And what do the kings of the Gentiles do?
Lord it over them.
Okay, they lord it over People, right? Yeah. And what else do they do?
They call, those who lord over them are called benefactors.
Okay, they call benefactors, which is really interesting. Because what does it mean to be called a benefactor?
A giver.
A giver. Now, is a benefactor a negative giver? Not usually. We wouldn't think, and it's in Greek, it's not, this isn't a negative word, you know. So we've got the kings of the Gentiles, Lord, so they're taking action to the Lord, but they also have authority over those who are giving good things that are regarded as benefactors. What do both of those things, so you've got them lording over and serving as benefactors, what do those two things have in common?
Who's going to be in charge?
What's that? Okay, that's being in charge, right? It's doing something. It's taking action. Whether the action is negative, lording it over, or whether it's positive, being a benefactor, they're actively involved taking action. Now, I think this is really important to understand what Jesus is getting at in what follows. And I'll tell you, this is where I was more confused, and I'm kind of still working it out, you know, what he's trying to say. Now, he says that about the Gentiles, right? How is it different for the disciples? How is it different than the disciples?
They're not gonna have control or lordship over anybody, they're gonna be the servants.
Well, what does he say? What does Jesus say in verse 26?
You're not to be like that.
Okay, but that's not the way. And not a surprise that you're not supposed to be like Gentiles. Because, like I said, I think Luke is the most profoundly Jewish of the four Gospels. The Gentiles are the ones on the outside, you know, right now. So that's not a shock. You don't want to be like these kings of the Gentiles, whether they're doing good things or bad things. That's not who you are. That's not how you define greatness. Instead, how do you define greatness? How should you define? You disciples, you apostles, how should you define greatness? What does Jesus say? What is the greatest among you?
Should be like the youngest.
It's like the youngest. Okay, now let's pause there. The greatest among you should be like the youngest. Ooh. So they should become young. Now, what is he getting at when he says you're supposed to be, if you want to be great, you need to be like the youngest? What is he getting at?
Not have the wisdom of the world.
Okay, the youngest not only would not have wisdom of
And be wise.
much of anything, you know, because that's what being young means. What else does it mean to be the young? It's not just being young, it's being the youngest. So you're not wise, because babies are seldom wise.
So as a child, basically.
Learn.
Yeah, so tell me about what it would look like to become, because he says you become, which means you can do it. What would it look like to become like the youngest?
Servant.
Well, hold on, servant, for just a minute, because Alice, I think that's the direction I have always gone. Always. 100% of the time. But I'm not sure that's where Jesus is
You
going.
need care. You need someone to care for you because
Okay,
you're not able to do or
Good.
care.
You need somebody to care for you, right? Because you are, as the youngest.
A baby.
You are baby, you are helpless, you are weak, you lack power, all those things. That's the youngest. You know, you therefore desperately need somebody to care for you, right? You need somebody else. Then what does he say? What does Jesus say? So Jesus says if you want to be the greatest, you got to be like the youngest. And then what does he say?
The leader like one who serves.
The leader who's one that serves. What I have done for 38 years is I ignored when he said the leader. that's what I ignore. Because I don't think he's talking about greatness is being the youngest and serving. I think it is very intentional that we're talking about two different.
Yeah.
Based on what he's going to say later. Because what he says later makes sense if we separate those two. So we've got the greatest are the ones who are the youngest. And again, not a shock. What's one of the themes we saw in Luke? What does Luke do over and over again? Talk about?
Lifts the low.
Lifts the low, brings down. That's a theme in Luke. This reversal. He's working a reversal. That's not a shock. That the greatest is the one who is the youngest. That's kind of a reversal. And the leader is the one who serves.
So he's not telling you not to be a leader, he's telling you how to be a leader.
He defines leadership. And I think it's different than greatness. I don't think he's suggesting that all great people are leaders. I don't think that's his point. And in fact, as he goes further, I don't even think he's talking about us when he says
Right.
the leader serves, based on what he's going to say later. Now, understand, as I pull back, and I got to hesitate because I kind of got, I think I see what's going on here. I don't want to lose my train of thought. If we look in other places in Scripture, there is no question that Christians are told to serve. That's a theme that comes up over and over and over again, and it's in the Gospels, and it's in the letters of Paul, and it's certainly in James. The idea that we are here to serve is a big deal. I'm just not sure that's what Jesus is talking about here. So I don't want to say that because he's not talking about it here, it means we don't have to do it, or we're not under any obligation to do it. I just don't think that's his point here. Because I think he separates those two. The one who is great and the one who leads. Okay, so the leadership is shown by service, right?
Yeah.
Now, what's the problem if you equate weakness with service? What becomes a problem when leadership, when service and the way he's defined greatness? What's the problem if you say they're tied together? If greatness is being the youngest, then what would that mean? The youngest would have to serve, right? If the youngest would have to lead, the baby would have to lead. Well, can a baby serve?
No.
Heck no. A baby needs to
Be taught.
be served. Yeah, a baby is served. A baby doesn't serve others. There would be a contradiction in the images here. And I don't think there's a contradiction.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, what example, and this is what, ladies, I'll tell you, I kind of struggled with this for about 15 minutes. What example does Jesus offer to support what he has just written?
Himself.
The greatest among you must become the youngest, and the leader like the one who serves. Verse 24 starts with a wonderful word that I'll tell you, when you read the Bible, it may be the most important word in Scripture. What is the first word in verse 27?
27, she said 24.
What's that?
Mine says 4.
4. That's I think the most important word in Scripture. 4. Because the word for in Greek is gar. It's a 3-letter word called gar. And 4 always answers something that was established in what came before it. In other words, it answers an implied question in what was already said. Usually it's used to explain. And so when you see 4, you look at what comes ahead. You look at what comes ahead. The big statement, the dominant statement in the Bible never starts with 4. It supports what came before it. Which means, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, answers something, John 3:16 answers something that was established in 3:14 and 15. It answers a question. It is not the key sentence in that what the key sentence is what came before it. That answers a question that's implied. That's grammatically in Greek grammar, that's what the word does. And he uses the word for here, which means what he's about to say is directly related to what he's already talked about with greatness and leadership. Now, good. Then what does he say? After he says for, let me explain to you what I've just told you. What does he say in explanation? Just that verse. Because he asked two questions, right?
Mm-hmm. Who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves?
Okay. Which one is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Now, if before the answer was, greatness is shown by service, right? Mm-hmm. You know, we become great by serving others. The answer to that question is what? Yeah, the one who serves. The greater one is the one who serves, not the one who's at table. But then what does he ask? Then what does he say?
That I am among you as one.
What's the second question?
Is not the one who is at the
Interesting. If you look at the structure of the question.
So who is at the table? Okay.
Okay, good.
So Jesus is saying, I'm down here with you. This is God who is at the table.
Well, hold on that for a minute, but I think that's the direction he wants us to go. Is it not the one who is at table? What answer does Jesus want to that first question? Now, around this table for us, every one of us, including me, said, when he said, for who is greater, the one who is at table or the one who serves? Well, certainly the one who serves. That's great. He's greater, right? The servant, because Jesus defines greatness in terms of service. But then Jesus says what? Is it not the one who's at table? So what is Jesus saying about greatness? Is the great person the one serving?
Or the one at the table.
It's the one that's at the table is the great one. The youngest, the one who's at table. That's why greatness and leadership are separate. You know, the greatness is, the great people are the ones who are around the table, right? Now, if they're around the table being served, what does that suggest about them? If what he said, greatness is shown, the greatest among you is the one who becomes like the youngest. And when you think about practical terms, you know, the servant in a restaurant, the waitress isn't greater than the person who's paying the bill, right? Mm-hmm. You know, she's not of higher status. If I'm sitting around the table being served, how is that similar to what he said about greatness being like the youngest? If I'm being served, what am I doing? If I'm sitting at this table and I am being served my meal, what am I doing? What am I doing?
Eating.
Okay, I'm eating, right?
They have come before, so they are young. So not young in the sense of age-wise, but they were here first. The first shall be last and last will be first. So they were here.
What if I'm sitting at this table and you are serving me? What am I doing? I'm eating, right? What else am I doing?
You can't do it yourself, apparently.
What am I doing? Nothing. Nothing, right? I'm sitting here.
You're eating.
You're serving me. I'm eating. I may be picking up a fork. I may be putting a napkin on my lap. But am I really doing anything?
No.
No, I'm not doing anything. Who is active?
The servant.
The one who is serving is the one who is active. I'm not. In fact, I'm not unlike a baby sitting in a high chair who has A parent that brings me my
Food.
food.
And that's what Jesus does.
And that becomes the definition of greatness. It's the baby sitting in a high chair. That's greatness. The baby, not the one who is bringing the baby stuff. But the greatness is the one who is just sitting there. Receiving it. Recognizing, because he says become young, recognizes exactly the power he has or she has. The one who is served becomes great. Now again, we're going to talk a little bit about Luke's context, because I think this really works well to Luke's church. Now, how does he fit into this example? So Jesus says that, when you're sitting around the table, the one who is greatest is the one with the highest, is the one at the table. The one, not the server, but the one being served. What role does he put himself? Where does Jesus put himself?
As one who serves.
As the one who serves. So Jesus is the one who is
The server.
Is the server. He's the one that is active. He's the one who is the leader, right? He's the one who is doing that.
And who is feeding you.
Which means the disciples are what? The ones around the table being fed. Well, that's crazy. We all know that's a sign of weakness, right? If somebody's serving me, that shows that I'm weak.
No.
Yeah, it does. But you know what? In the kingdom of God, weakness is a sign of greatness. An acceptance and recognition of weakness and powerlessness and need becomes a characteristic of greatness. That's what it means to be great. Is to be able to accept it. Now, I think so. Let's see if what he says after that is consistent, because this becomes a real problem. His response to that question, because he gives the answer, and boy, I wish he had said the one who is great is the one who serves, but he doesn't. He says the one who's great is the one who isn't serving. Mm-hmm. He's serving. Now, according to verse 28, how have the disciples become like the youngest? And how are they like people sitting around a table?
That they stood by him during his trials, and that he confers on them the kingdom.
Yeah, the disciples have stood by him in his trials. Now, understand, this is only found in the Gospel of Luke. This is only in Luke. Now, when he says, now he's talking to apostles, right? He says, you are those who have stood by me in my trials. Now, talking to the 12 or the 11, would they understand what he's talking about? That they stood with him through his trials?
I don't think so.
Well, what trials has he faced? What trials has Jesus faced to this point in the Gospel of Luke? What trials has he faced?
He'd been stoned, he'd been thrown.
No, he hadn't been stoned.
Nothing.
He hadn't been stoned.
Oh, yeah.
No, he hadn't been stoned. What trials has Jesus faced in Luke? None. He hasn't faced any trials. Now, will he face trials? Oh boy, he's going to face trials. Next chapter. Lord have mercy, he's going to face trials. But to this point, he really hasn't faced. They've rejected him. They want to kill him. I'm sure that hurt him. I'm sure that hurt him deeply. I'm sure that was hard for his self-esteem. He hasn't faced any trials. Not anything like he's going to face, right?
He wouldn't be considering like whenever the Pharisees were questioning him and going through all that at the temple.
Well, you know something? Maybe. And they weren't all that hard, were they? Because he always had an answer for them. And in fact, his answer was so good, they got quiet. So, if he's facing trials, they hadn't faced much.
Right.
Who has stood by him through the trials?
Peter?
Who will have stood by him through the trials? Luke's church, those Christians later. who still affirm who he is, even though he was crucified on a cross, even though they've endured persecution, even though they have been hauled in front of courts and tried and convicted and thrown into jail. Everything we're going to see in the book of Acts, all the stuff going on there, they've stood before him through the trials. The apostles haven't yet. This becomes something that's spoken, I think, to the church later. It's being spoken to who? To us. It's being spoken to us. He's saying, you're at this table because you've stood with me through all these trials, all this bad stuff. The persecution, the rejection, my crucifixion, your suffering in jail, none of which the apostles have gone through yet. They will, but they haven't yet. You're going to face that. You're at the table. And it's kind of interesting. He's calling them, because they've endured this, trials that other people have put upon them. They haven't chosen it. It's been dumped on them. He's calling those people around the table what? Based on what he's already said here. He's calling you who have stood by me in my trials. He's saying to them what? He's calling them what? You are
Servants.
Friends.
not a servant. You are great.
Oh, great.
You are great. That's what greatness means. That's what greatness means. It's standing beside me through my trials. Lord have mercy. What has Luke's church been going through? What the heck has Luke's church been going through for the last 70 years, for the last 60 years? Trials, right?
Trials and tribulation.
Disappointments. Persecution. They face tough times. Jesus is looking them right in the eye and saying, guys, you are great. You are great. Not because of what you've done. See, that becomes the danger when greatness is tied to service. That means the more I serve, the greater I am. Therefore, greatness is something that I earn and I achieve. Jesus says, you've missed it. That's what the world says. That's what the Gentiles' kings do. Whether it's good stuff or bad stuff. They're the ones that are saying that. It's based on power. It's based on what you do. That's not who you are. Greatness is your ability to stay at that table. Greatness is your ability to endure. Greatness is to become like the youngest, to recognize your weakness, your lack of power, and allow yourself to be served by me. By me. Because I'm the one who serves. Whoa! This is a powerful message to a church that's kind of discouraged. It's not get up and pull up your socks and work harder. It's don't you realize you just being here shows your greatness. Your ability to survive shows that you're great in the sight of God. And so what's going to be the result of the fact that they are hanging around the table? That they are enduring? What is Jesus going to do to these great people?
Confer on you a kingdom.
You're going to have a kingdom.
They will judge.
Which is kind of fascinating because the whole thing started with, Gentile rulers. Man, you're going to have a kingdom. You're going to be conferred a kingdom. And this is why I think this idea that they are the great around the table being served, what's going to be the ultimate result?
Judging the 12 tribes of Israel.
Where are they going to be?
With Jesus in heaven.
Where are they going to be? In verse 30.
In my kingdom.
Where in my kingdom?
At my table.
At my table.
Kingdom.
At my table. You're going to be the ones gathered around the table. Are you the ones who are serving?
No.
Heck no. Heck no. Because whose job is it to serve? In this context, that's my job. That's my job to serve. Your job is to be at the table and be served.
And the disciples are going to judge the 12 tribes someday.
Yeah. Now the judging is more like ruling, not
Can't get her little leg
doing that.
hanging over her arm.
But it's so you're going to have, not only are you going to be around this table, you're going to share with me at this table, but you are going to be given the kind of authority that those Gentile kings have. And how have you gotten that? How have you gotten to this place?
Because they follow Jesus.
Because you've become like the youngest. You have chosen to be like the youngest. Gosh almighty, what an incredibly powerful message. Where we would expect him to say, you got to work harder. He says, you're missing the point. I'm doing the work. I'm here to serve you. Really a powerful, I think an incredibly powerful message. And I think it's very consistent, and you can get to another place, but you got to take stuff out. Particularly the answer to that question, who is greatest? The one who serves or the one who is served? Well, he says the one who is served is greater. Interesting. Now, establishes this, really important, I think, in Luke's church to hear, because Luke is communicating to his church that those people who have endured all that garbage, they are great just for hanging in there. They are great just to survive. Just surviving has made you great. Now, to whom does he turn in verse 31?
Simon.
Okay, he turns to Simon. And he says something really interesting to Simon. And Simon, what's Simon's other name? Simon Peter. Okay, Simon Peter, who is the leader of the group. He's the spokesman. He's always in the middle. And this, again, is something unique in Luke. He turns to Simon in 31, and what does he tell Simon?
That they were going to sift you as wheat.
Satan is going to sift you like wheat. What do you think that means? That Satan is going to sift you like wheat.
That could be pretty.
Yeah, kind of.
Shaking.
Yeah, kind of harkens back a little bit to Job kind of business. Now, who else has been hit by Satan?
Judas.
Judas has. In a very interesting way. When Jesus says that, Satan's going to sift you like wheat. What is Jesus suggesting? What might Jesus be suggesting about Peter's denial? Because again, Luke is the only one where this appears. We don't see it in any of the other Gospels. If he says to Peter, turns to Peter and says, Satan's going to shift you like wheat. He's going to control you like a farmer threshing his crop. He's going to shuck you just like wheat. What is he suggesting?
It's almost like Peter's going to take over control. He's not going to leave the glory and the control to God and Jesus. He's going to take over that authority in the flesh.
Who is leading him to do that?
Satan.
Gosh, Luke has Satan entering Judas. Luke has Satan doing what? Influencing Peter. Mm-hmm. Judas betrays him. Peter denies him. Satan's involved in both. Mm-hmm. We don't see that in the other three Gospels, where Satan is involved with Peter. You don't see that. We just got Peter saying, I'm going to stand out for you. Jesus saying, no, you're going to betray me. But here, Satan's involved. It's almost like what you're going to do, just like what Judas did, is Satan. What you're going to do is Satan. Now, why?
Here's the word. Satan has asked to sift you.
I'm sorry, what?
Satan has asked to sift you.
Okay, listen,
I don't
demanded.
have that either.
Satan has demanded to sit. Okay, yeah. So,
Jesus has that.
yeah.
So he's
yeah,
asking Jesus.
yeah. That Satan's involved again. You know. Now, why would it be? Certainly, we got this cosmic thing. This is bigger. This is bigger than Judas. This is bigger than Judas or Peter. Satan is involved in this. Satan is involved in the story, but God's in control. Why might it be really, really important for Luke to if he says, if Peter's denial, and then he's going to talk about the denial, if Peter's denial is at least in part because of Satan, just like Judas's betrayal, Peter's denial is at least in part because of Satan. That Satan has demanded that he be sifted like grain. What does that do to Peter? What does that do to Peter's reputation?
Lowers it.
Does it? If Peter denies him because he's scared or because, for whatever reason.
Denies who?
Jesus, because he's going to deny
okay,
Jesus,
okay,
right?
okay,
If
yes.
Peter does that because Peter's scared, or Peter doesn't want the hassle, or Peter wants to avoid being involved, that's Peter's decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if Satan's involved, in him making that decision, is Peter totally responsible for denying him? No, he's not. Now, why might that be important, particularly for Luke? To say that Peter's denial is not because Peter's a jerk. Why might that be really important for Luke to establish?
Because Satan is still in the picture, still trying to direct what's going to happen.
Absolutely, Satan's involved in it. Luke, the Gospel of Luke is 2 volumes, right? Volume 1 is the Gospel. What's volume 2? Acts. Acts. Who's the star in the first 14 chapters of Acts? Who's the star? I know. Who's the star in the first? Well, Jesus is gone. He's ascended.
Yes,
Who's the star?
Peter.
Yes, Peter's the star. Peter's the star. He's the one that leads the church. He's the one, get this. How did Jesus heal people? How did Jesus heal people? How did he heal people? He touched them. Sometimes he commanded, but he touched or commanded. You know how Peter can heal people in Acts? Doesn't have to touch. His shadow heals people. Peter's shadow heals people. Wow is right. Peter's a big deal in the book of Acts. Here, I think, again, because he's going to be such a play a big role, Luke doesn't want people saying, yeah, but Peter's a jerk that denied him. Satan's involved. So two things are accomplished. One, it raises it to a higher level. And second, it means Peter isn't totally responsible for being a coward and a jerk. It's not all his decision. He was manipulated just like Judas was manipulated. Okay. So anyway, Peter plays a big role in that. How does he respond to, or how does Jesus respond to Peter?
He tells him he'll deny him 3 times.
But at first he says, I am praying for you.
Yeah.
That your faith not fail. And then what?
You will deny me 3 times before the rooster crows.
What's that?
Well, to go back to 31,
Yeah.
in mine it says, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. And then he says, but I prayed for you, Simon,
Okay.
that your faith may not fail.
Okay.
But when you
So-
come back, strengthen your brothers.
So what does that, what is, that makes it even, I think, even stronger. What is Jesus saying to all of them? Because what's ultimately going to happen to them all?
Well, he's talking to Simon, but he's telling him that Satan is after all of them.
Right,
But
right.
But he's praying, but Jesus is praying for Simon, his faith won't fail.
Yeah, why? And then what does he say after his faith won't fail?
And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers.
What's he talking about? About turning back and strengthening brothers.
So when he turned, that's what, I was a little confused there, when he turns back.
Yeah.
What's he talking? What's he talking about? Huh?
They all turned away from
Right. So they're all involved. This, I think, even makes it stronger. When is Peter going to turn back and strengthen his brothers? After the resurrection. You know, it's going to be the book of Acts. So this is what he's praying that Peter play the role in Acts. That Peter's going to what? Play in Acts. That he's going to play in Acts. But of course, Peter says to Jesus, of course, what does he say to Jesus? I am ready to be put in prison, and I'm going to be, which is kind of interesting, because Jesus is justifying greatness as what? Being weak, being served, enduring. And what is Peter saying? I'm not going to be weak. I'm not going to endure. What am I going to do? I'm going to go for it. By George, I'm going to be anything but weak.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means, by Jesus' definition, I'm going to be anything but great. By George, and Jesus says,
And when he tells him about the rooster crowing.
Lord have mercy, you don't get it. You don't get it. You really don't get it. And then finally, he gives, I know, she rests her head on my shoulder. And then as a final, this is the final thing Jesus is going to talk to him about. What does Jesus say? Which, again, unique to Luke. What does he say? Because if you look at the meal in Matthew and Mark, once he shares the bread and the cup, they go. They're done. They have a prayer and then they leave. Mm-hmm. Luke has this following. What does he say in his farewell speech?
When I sent you without purse or bag or sandals, did you lack anything?
Okay. Now, to what is he talking? Remember, he sent them out earlier in the gospel.
Yeah.
You know,
He called the disciples to follow him.
Yeah, well, and remember, he sent out the 70, and then he sent out the 12 to do it, and he said, remember, he said, don't take any purse, don't take a change of clothes. When people invite you into the house, accept their hospitality. You know, he says that. And so when he sent them out, did they lack anything?
No.
No, they didn't, because they came back and they were great. And they say, we didn't lack anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does he say to them now?
Now he says, if you have a purse, take it, also a bag, and if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. That was the part that I wasn't so sure about.
To whom is this really directed? Well, we'll say it's directed at them, but it isn't directed at them, okay, tonight I'm going to go buy a sword. What's he talking about?
That's
When he
what I
says
don't
to them, but
understand.
now the one who has a purse must take it, and likewise a bag, and the one who has no sword must sell his cloak and buy one. Who's he talking to?
The disciples.
Well, he's talking to the apostles there, and I imagine they're saying, what?
Yeah.
You know, what? Therefore the message isn't for them there. The message is where? To whom?
Us.
I think it's to us.
Mm-hmm.
And by saying this, what is Jesus suggesting?
That's the part I don't understand about the sword.
Well, by all of it, what is he suggesting? Be prepared. Alice, I think that's exactly right. You know, you got to understand. You got to be prepared. You got to be prepared. The world in which you're going to be living after I'm gone is going to be rough. It's going to be a rough world. And you need to keep your purse. And you need to make sure you got to change your clothes. And you may even need to have some protection. Because you are living in a hostile world. When Luke's Christians and his church read that, what do you think they thought when they heard Jesus say that?
Not really.
Do you think they said,
They probably thought, yeah, but it won't be that bad.
well, yeah, but I mean, 90 years later, 60 years later, do you think Luke's church, the Christians 60 years after Jesus shared this, do you think that church is thinking, we need to be prepared?
You ate them all, didn't
Well, I think they live in a tough world. You can't expect to have food on your table. Miraculously have food on the table. You better buy some. You better have a job. You better have some protection. Because you live in the real world and that world is hard.
Why? I still don't understand. Why would he tell them to have a sword?
Well, why would he say have a sword? What would the sword? And in fact, Peter, what do the apostles say when he says you better get a sword?
Somebody said, here are 2 swords.
Yeah, we got 2 swords, and Jesus says
That's enough.
that's enough. You don't need them. You don't need an arsenal. Why would 2 swords be enough? And in fact, it's kind of between that in verse 37, he says what? Which is really kind of interesting. And I think really speaks to something Luke's church is dealing with. What's grounded in Scripture?
What is written
about me?
Yeah.
It's reaching its fulfillment.
Yeah. That they're going to accuse you. They accuse me of being lawless. They're going to accuse you of being lawless too. Very interesting. I've told you before, one of the reasons Christians were persecuted by the Romans wasn't because they worshiped Jesus. Romans could care less who you worship. They didn't care. Christians were persecuted for the Romans because they weren't good Romans. They broke Roman law. That's why they were persecuted. They were lawless. So, I mean, it historically makes sense. But, why would he say, buy 1 sword, we got 2, should we get more? And he says, no, why? What is the sword? What's the purpose of the sword? What's the only purpose of the sword? Protect yourself. That's the only reason you got it. You don't get swords so you can conquer the world. You're not an army. You're just going to need to be protected. As the youngest, as the one who has so little power, you're going to need some protection.
But see, that's why I wonder, because in the garden when they came to arrest him, when Peter cut off the ear of that one dude, Jesus healed it.
Well, I think he's talking about something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's talking about something bigger. And this is how Jesus' teaching to his disciples ends. So as a result, what do we take from this? Because I find this particular conversation, and again, partly because it's unique to Luke, I find just so fascinating. What do we take from this? I know, having read it, some of my perspectives have kind of shifted this morning. What do we take from what Jesus is saying in this last conversation to his disciples?
He's preparing them to live in
He's preparing them to live in the real world. He's preparing them to live in the real world. Remember, he's also redefined greatness. And greatness isn't shown by strength. Greatness is shown by
Following him.
and weakness. Greatness is shown by being served, not serving. At least as he defines it here. Greatness is defined by enduring. With a sword, in case somebody kicks down your door. But it means enduring. It doesn't mean conquering.
It's not inciting them to go to war or anything.
Yeah.
He's he's saying that's enough.
Yeah,
Protect yourself, but
yeah,
basically follow him.
yeah.
And I'm thinking he told us for a reason when Peter denied him 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't imagine, you know, when you are in a fearful situation of your life
Mm-hmm.
and people attacking you,
Right.
I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably deny him too.
Good. And I think
And
that's what.
that just sickens me, but at the same
is.
time, I'm so glad that he put that in scripture.
Yes, and you know, when you think, if the interpretation I'm offering today is right, what Jesus is saying is he'd look at you with those feelings and say, you know what? You don't realize it, but you're great. You are great. Instead of, you should try harder. If you want to be great, you got to pull it together. He's saying, don't you realize I'm the one who serves? It's my kingdom, and you got a place in it.
But how can we share the gospel if we're dead? So I think
Right.
that's also why, part of why he's saying is,
That's right.
you know what, if you have to, he's not saying it outright, but for somebody to endure and they denied Jesus, but then they're still living and they're able to secretly teach their children
Yeah.
about God.
You are not going to be able to do much
If
if you starve, if you're dead. You're not going to be able to do much.
Oh, honey.
And that's what you're called to do.
Who's a sweet girl?
To me, this is, boy, I'd love to preach. I don't think I've ever preached this. Maybe one day. This is good stuff. This is good stuff. Okay, next week we're going to move into some very familiar ground, even in the Gospel of Luke. We're going to look at 22, 39 through 62. We're going to be dealing with the prayer at Gethsemane, which is a little different in Luke than Mark, the arrest, and then the denial, Peter's denials. So, thank you for giving me, just being here and helping me kind of work through some things that I think are
Well,
Really
thank you for
exciting.
helping us
You
figure out
just
some
want
of
to be the
this.
youngest.
Look, at one time, it's interesting you say that. One time in my life, and I don't know, maybe y'all don't deal with this, haven't dealt with it, but I deal with it all the time. I think about it a lot. When I started, and that would have been 38 years ago, in most minister groups, I was the youngest. I was the youngest. I have always been the youngest. When I was in academic programs, often I was
The youngest.
the youngest. And all of a sudden, you hit a point and you kind of have that mindset as you go. And you're still thinking, they're older, I'm younger. And now, in those groups,
You're the oldest.
I'm about the oldest. Of ministers who are still ministers, not retired. But people who are still, I'm the oldest. In fact, a lot of my colleagues have retired, and they're my age. So it's a weird feeling when you have always been the kid, and now you're the granddaddy of them all. So that's kind of interesting you say that. I just want to be the youngest. I'm not the youngest anymore. All right, let's have a word of prayer. Lord God, thank you so much for giving us this time together, and help us to decide to become the youngest. Help us to recognize our weakness, our vulnerability. Also guide us so that we address that, because we live in the real world, but also allow us to be served by you. Help us to look at you as the one who offers us what we need, instead of assuming that we can do it ourselves. And then as a people united, help us do the work we've been called to do. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen.
Amen.